Part 1. My name is James, and for the longest time, I thought I had it all. A beautiful wife, a wonderful 6-year-old daughter, a stable job, and a home that echoed with laughter. My wife, Emily, was the kind of woman who turned heads even after a decade of marriage. Blonde, green-eyed, effortlessly graceful. I was proud to be her husband, and even prouder to be the father of our little girl, Lily. Our life was picture-perfect. I worked in finance, making enough to provide a comfortable life, while Emily stayed home with Lily, managing the house, keeping everything in order, and ensuring our daughter had the best childhood imaginable. She had once worked as a marketing consultant, but had decided to take a break from corporate life to focus on being a mother. I respected her for it. We had rituals. Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday movie nights, and vacations twice a year. Our latest adventure took us to Croatia, where we island hopped along the Dalmatian coast. It was breathtaking. The azure waves, the rustic charm of the small villages, the warmth of the sun on our skin, it felt like paradise. Emily was particularly fond of the sea. She'd always loved the water, and this vacation was something she had planned meticulously. She spent days researching the best islands, the most secluded beaches, the finest seafood restaurants. I let her take the reins because I trusted her judgment, and honestly, I enjoyed seeing her so excited. One evening, we found ourselves on a remote island, far from the usual tourist spots. We had rented a small villa overlooking the Adriatic, and everything felt surreal. That night, we had dinner at a small coastal restaurant where the owner knew Emily's name, something I found odd at the time but dismissed. I emailed back and forth with him when making the reservation, she explained casually. She was radiant that night. Wearing a white sundress, her skin sun-kissed, she looked happier than I had seen her in a long time. I chalked it up to the vacation magic, the kind that rekindles romance and reminds you why you fell in love in the first place. We spent the rest of the trip indulging in the simplicity of island life. Lazy mornings, adventurous afternoons, and intimate nights. We explored ancient ruins, swam in the clearest waters I'd ever seen, and sipped wine on our villa's balcony as the sun set over the sea. Every moment was perfect, frozen in time like a dream I never wanted to wake from. Emily and I had always been close, but something about this trip made me appreciate her even more. She was an amazing mother, always ensuring Lily felt safe and happy, but she was also my best friend. We could talk for hours about anything and everything, and that night, under the moonlit sky, I felt lucky. I had a wife who loved me, a daughter who adored us both, and a life that many would envy. Lily was having the time of her life, too. She had made little friends on the beach, played in the sand until her tiny hands were covered in salt and sun, and giggled as we chased her through the shallow waves. Seeing her happiness made everything worth it. During our stay, we took a boat tour to visit hidden caves and lagoons. Emily was fascinated by the beauty of the sea, her laughter echoing as the water splashed around us. At one point, she reached for my hand and squeezed it, looking at me with a warmth that melted my heart. "I love this," she whispered. "I love you." That night, we lay in bed, the windows open to let the cool sea breeze in. Emily traced circles on my chest as we talked about our future, our plans, our dreams, the life we were building together. We spoke about growing old, about seeing Lily grow up, about taking more trips like this. It was perfect. As our vacation came to an end, I remember sitting on the deck of our villa, watching Emily and Lily play by the shore. The way Emily scooped Lily up into her arms, spinning her around as she laughed, filled my heart with warmth. I thought to myself, this is it. This is everything I've ever wanted. The morning of our departure, Emily and I took a walk along the beach before sunrise. The world was quiet, the waves lapping gently at the shore. She leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder. "I wish we could stay here forever," she sighed. I kissed her forehead. "We'll come back," I promised. We boarded the plane back home, and as Emily rested her head on my shoulder, I smiled, completely content. We had built a life full of love, trust, and happiness. No worries, no doubts, just pure, unwavering joy. Part 2. Coming back from Croatia should have been a return to normalcy, but something felt off. At first, I couldn't place it. It was subtle, a shift in the air between us, a sense of distance where there had been none before. I dismissed it as post-vacation blues. That feeling when reality starts settling in after a perfect getaway. But then, the little things started adding up. The first real red flag appeared within days of getting home. Emily was getting dressed one morning when I noticed her underwear. It was new, black lace, delicate, expensive looking. The kind of thing she never bought for herself. I frowned. "When did you get that?" She glanced at me in the mirror, adjusting the straps. Oh, this? I bought it a while ago, just never got around to wearing it. That didn't sit right with me. Emily had never been one to splurge on lingerie. She preferred comfort over lace, practicality over luxury. And I knew for a fact that I hadn't bought it for her. You sure? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. I don't remember seeing that before. She laughed, turning to kiss me on the cheek. James, I think you just don't pay enough attention. I have tons of things you probably never noticed. I wanted to let it go. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overanalyzing a simple piece of clothing. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing faster than I could control. Emily wasn't acting strange in an obvious way. She wasn't sneaking out at night or lying about where she was going. She was home, always home. If anything, she was more attentive to me than before, always asking how my day was, making sure we spent time together. But something still felt off. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, I noticed her staring at her reflection in the mirror, lost in thought. You okay? I asked. She blinked and turned to me with a soft smile. Yeah, just thinking. About what? She hesitated for a moment. The trip. It was beautiful, wasn't it? It was perfect. She nodded, but there was something in her eyes, something unreadable. Regret? Nostalgia? I couldn't tell. But it was enough to unsettle me. Emily never acted guilty, never gave me a concrete reason to doubt her. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that her mind was somewhere else. Not here with me, not in our home. It was still back in Croatia. She spent a lot of time looking at her phone, but never in a secretive way. It was always casual, scrolling, tapping, staring at the screen with a wistful expression. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch watching TV, I glanced over at her. She was lost in her phone again, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing patterns on the screen. What are you looking at? I asked. She quickly turned it off and placed it beside her. Just photos from the trip. I nodded, but something about the way she rushed to put it away didn't sit right with me. She never contacted anyone from Croatia. There were no secret texts, no unexplained absences. But I started to notice that whenever we talked about the trip, she got quiet. Almost wistful. Like she was reliving something in her mind that I wasn't a part of. One night, I woke up to find her sitting in the dim glow of her bedside lamp, flipping through our vacation photos on her phone. I watched her for a moment, her expression soft, almost longing. When she noticed me stirring, she quickly turned off the screen and slid under the covers. Couldn't sleep? I murmured. She curled up beside me, resting her head against my chest. Just reminiscing. I kissed her forehead, willing myself to believe her. The next day, I decided to check our shared photo album. I found the pictures we had taken, our daughter playing in the sand, the sunsets we had admired together, the meals we had shared. But there were also a few shots of the town that I didn't remember taking. A view from a terrace, a narrow street, a picture of a wine glass sitting on a table, candlelight reflecting in the deep red liquid. Something about those images made my stomach turn. I tried to brush it off, but the nagging feeling wouldn't leave me alone. Emily hadn't brought anything back from Croatia except souvenirs and photos. But something had followed her home, something unseen. It was in the way she lingered over memories of the trip, the way she gazed off into the distance when she thought I wasn't looking. She was here, physically. But her heart? Her heart was still thousands of miles away. I wanted to ask. I wanted to demand the truth, but I was terrified of what she might say. Instead, I did what any desperate man would do. I convinced myself it was nothing. Part 3. A year after our trip to Croatia, Emily suggested another vacation. She was the one who planned our trips, always picking places that felt like an escape from reality. This time, she chose Greece. The idea of sun-drenched islands and crystal-clear waters sounded perfect, but something about her enthusiasm felt different, almost urgent. Like she needed this trip more than she wanted it. I agreed, hoping a vacation would shake the unease I still felt since we came back from Croatia. Maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe time away from work and responsibilities would clear my head. We arrived in Santorini, and Emily was practically glowing. It reminded me of how she had been in Croatia, alive, free, almost euphoric. I wanted to believe it was just the thrill of traveling again, but deep down, I knew something else was stirring beneath the surface. On our third day there, we stopped at a small seaside cafe. The moment we sat down, Emily's entire demeanor shifted. Her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Then, a man approached our table. He was tall, tanned, with dark hair and a confident smile. Emily's expression changed instantly, surprise, excitement, something else I couldn't quite place. James, she said, her voice unnaturally casual. This is Mark. We met last year in Croatia. He's a traveler, like us. My stomach tightened. Croatia. A name to a ghost I didn't know existed. Mark extended his hand, and I shook it, forcing a polite smile. Nice to meet you, I said, studying his face. There was something unsettling about his presence, an unspoken familiarity between him and Emily that I couldn't ignore. They exchanged pleasantries, but I wasn't really listening. I was watching them, how Emily's posture leaned slightly toward him, how Mark's eyes flickered with something unreadable when he looked at her. How do you two know each other? I asked, keeping my tone light. Emily waved a hand dismissively. Oh, we just met at one of those little beach bars in Croatia. He was traveling solo, and we had a few conversations. Small world, right? Mark smirked. Yeah, Emily has a way of making people feel welcome. Something about the way he said it made my jaw clench. We sat through the most uncomfortable lunch of my life. Emily was engaged, laughing at Mark's jokes, finishing his sentences like they had shared years of conversation, not just a few casual chats on an island. I had never seen her this way with anyone else. After we left the cafe, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Why didn't you ever mention him? I asked as we walked along the shoreline. Emily frowned. What? Mark. You said you met him in Croatia, but you never talked about him. She hesitated, just for a second. I didn't think it was important. We barely knew each other. I stopped walking. Emily, you acted like you've known him for years. She sighed, rubbing her temples. James, please don't start. It was just a coincidence running into him. You're overthinking things. Maybe I was. Maybe it really was just an old acquaintance showing up at the right place, right time. But my gut told me otherwise. Over the next few days, Mark kept appearing. Always coincidentally. At a restaurant we had chosen at random, on the same hiking trail we decided to explore. It was too much to be accidental. One evening, I pretended to be asleep while Emily sat on the balcony, her phone in hand. The faint glow of the screen illuminated her face, and I watched as she typed, paused, deleted, then typed again. Finally, she sent a message. A few minutes later, a notification lit up her screen. I couldn't see the name, but I saw the message. I don't know how much longer I can do this. She sighed, staring at the words before turning off the phone and slipping back into bed beside me. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told her I was going to check out a local market and asked if she wanted to come. She declined, saying she had a headache and wanted to rest. I left, but I didn't go to the market. I waited. 15 minutes later, she left the hotel. I followed. She walked with purpose, down winding paths, past busy cafes, toward a quieter part of town. My heart pounded as she stopped outside a secluded villa. She knocked once, and the door opened. Mark stood there. She stepped inside. The door closed. I stood frozen, my worst fears confirmed. It hadn't been a chance encounter. This wasn't some casual friendship. This was something deeper, something long before Santorini. They had a history, and I was the fool who never saw it coming. Part 4. I stood frozen outside the villa, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the sounds of the street behind me. The air was thick and humid, but I felt cold, numb. My wife, my Emily, was inside with him. I don't know how long I stood there before I moved. Maybe minutes, maybe an eternity. But when I did, I was driven by something deeper than anger, something raw, something desperate. I needed to know. I needed to see it for myself. I crept around the side of the villa, my hands shaking. The windows were partially open, the white linen curtains billowing slightly in the breeze. I peered inside, and there she was. Emily stood by the bed, her back to me, completely naked. Mark was there too, his hands on her waist, pulling her toward him. She tilted her head back, eyes closed, lips parted as she let out a soft sigh. It was the kind of sound she used to make for me. I felt something inside me break. I fumbled for my phone, barely able to keep my hands steady as I took the pictures. I didn't want to, but I had to. I needed proof. Proof that the woman I had given my life to had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Mark turned her around, their lips meeting in a kiss that was anything but new. This wasn't something fresh, something uncertain. This was familiar, intimate, a continuation of something that had started long before I ever knew about it. I clenched my jaw so tightly I thought my teeth would shatter. I wanted to storm in there, to rip them apart, to make them feel the pain that was tearing me apart from the inside. But I didn't. I took a deep breath, swallowed my rage, and walked away. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the beach, staring at the waves, my mind racing. I could feel the weight of my wedding band on my finger, a reminder of the vows she had shattered. Every moment of our life together played in my head like a cruel joke. The years we had spent building something I thought was real, only for it to be a lie. By the time I returned to the hotel in the morning, Emily was already there. She was sitting on the balcony, sipping coffee, looking out at the sea like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just destroyed everything we had. She turned when she heard me enter. "Hey," she said, smiling. "You were out early." I stared at her, trying to understand how she could look so normal, so at peace, when my world had just crumbled. "I couldn't sleep," I said, my voice hollow. She nodded, taking another sip of her coffee. "Maybe we should go home soon," she murmured. "I think I'm ready." I almost laughed. Ready? She was ready now? After she had gotten what she came here for? After she had spent the night with him? I forced myself to nod. "Yeah, we should." The flight home was silent. Emily must have sensed something was wrong, but she didn't ask. Maybe she thought she had been careful enough. Maybe she thought I was just in a bad mood. Maybe she didn't care. The moment we landed, I put my plan into motion. I contacted a lawyer, started gathering everything I needed. The photos, the records, everything that would make sure she wouldn't walk away from this unscathed. The night before I confronted her, I sat in my car outside our house, staring at the place where we had built a life together. The home we had filled with laughter, with love, with dreams. It felt like a graveyard now. When I finally walked inside, Emily was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, you okay? You've been quiet." I set my phone down on the counter and played the photos. The color drained from her face instantly. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared as image after image of her betrayal flashed before her eyes. I watched as the realization hit, as the weight of what she had done crashed down on her. "James," she whispered. Don't." I cut her off. My voice was calmer than I expected. "Don't lie to me." "Not anymore." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. She could cry all she wanted. It wouldn't change anything. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm going for full custody of Lily." Emily gasped. "James, please. Don't do this. Let's talk about it." "There's nothing to talk about." I picked up my phone, shoving it back into my pocket. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." She reached for me, but I stepped back. "You don't get to touch me," I said coldly. "Not after him." She broke then, sobbing, begging, pleading. But I had made up my mind. The woman I had loved was gone, and I would never forgive her. Part 5. The divorce was brutal. Not for me. I had all the power, all the evidence. But for Emily, it was the beginning of her downfall. I made sure of it. The court didn't hesitate to grant me full custody of Lily. The photos, the timeline, the sheer betrayal, it all painted a clear picture. Emily was not the devoted wife and mother she pretended to be. She was reckless, selfish. The judge saw it. Her lawyer knew it. And worst of all, she knew it too. She tried to fight, begged, pleaded. She sat on the stand with tears streaming down her face, swearing she had made a mistake, but that she still deserved to be a mother. I didn't even flinch. I had watched her lie to my face for over a year. I had watched her pretend to love me while secretly longing for another man. I wasn't going to let her drag my daughter down with her. When the verdict came down, full custody to me, supervised visitation for her, Emily collapsed. I didn't stay to comfort her. That wasn't my job anymore. As for Mark, his life didn't get any better. Emily had thought he was some romantic escape, a passionate secret she could keep forever. But she had underestimated what happens when the fantasy meets reality. When she lost everything, she ran straight to him. I know because she called me that night, sobbing, saying she had nowhere else to go. I hung up. She moved in with him. From the outside, they might have looked like some kind of tragic love story, the woman who lost everything for the man she couldn't resist. But real life isn't a fairy tale. Mark didn't want a broken woman. He wanted the thrill, the stolen moments, the forbidden passion. What he got instead was the shattered remains of someone who had destroyed her own life. They didn't even last 6 months. Mark kicked her out. She had no money, no job, no home. She had to move in with her sister, sleeping on a couch in a cramped apartment. Everyone knew what she had done. The whispers followed her everywhere. Friends distanced themselves. Even family looked at her differently. The worst part? Lily wanted nothing to do with her. At first, Emily tried to play the devoted mother. She showed up for her supervised visits dressed nice, smiling, trying to pretend everything was fine. But Lily wasn't stupid. She knew something was wrong. She knew her mother had broken our family apart. The visits became less frequent. Emily stopped calling as much. She started missing scheduled visits. Then she stopped coming altogether. And just like that, she faded from our lives. I thrived. Without Emily, without the weight of betrayal suffocating me, I rebuilt. I poured everything into being a father to Lily. I went to therapy, worked out, focused on my career. I became stronger, sharper, better. I made sure people knew what she had done. I didn't have to lie. I didn't have to embellish. The truth was damning enough. Emily wasn't just the woman who cheated. She was the woman who destroyed her own family for nothing. Years passed. Lily grew up happy, healthy, strong. She barely mentioned her mother. And Emily? She drifted like a ghost through her own ruined life, a shadow of the woman she once was. No career, no real friends, no reputation left to salvage. Every time she tried to rebuild, the truth of what she had done followed her. She lived in cheap apartments, hopping from job to job. Some people pitied her. I didn't. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. As for Mark, I heard he tried to move on, but karma has a way of catching up. His name became synonymous with home-wrecking. His own relationships crumbled under the weight of what he had done. Women didn't trust him. Men didn't respect him. His charm didn't work once people knew the truth. Emily reached out a few times. Emails. Voicemails. Desperate attempts to reconnect with Lily. I never responded. Lily didn't want to, either. By then, she understood everything. She once asked me, "Daddy, why doesn't Mommy love me enough to stay?" I told her the truth. She made bad choices, sweetheart. Some people don't know how to love the right way. And that was the last time we ever spoke about Emily. I had one, and I never looked back. One day, I ran into Emily. It had been years. I barely recognized her. She looked tired, worn down by the life she had chosen. She tried to smile at me, but there was shame in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked past her without a word. She had become nothing more than a stranger. And that's all she would ever be. The end.